Hey everyone, Stegar here and welcome back to Hunterville. In today's episode we're going to be continuing to work on the interchange that we built in the last episode, and today we're just going to detail around it with some trees and filling in any empty spaces with some suburban houses. So to start off with this episode, I decided to first fill in this area on the southern side of the interchange with some houses. Here I'm using some slightly newer ones that I've done in the asset editor. I only did these a few weeks ago, but in general they're using houses that look a bit newer than the ones I've been using previously, which were mostly wooden, and these ones are more kind of your brick McMansion sort of houses that you see there. And for that cul-de-sac I just attempted using the node controller mod to make the end of the road a lot wider. I just put a really small segment at the end and then adjusted some of the numbers with node controller to try and achieve what I'd done there. And then here going around and filling in a little bit of this empty space with some bushes and bits of grass on that cliff there. And then just going along and also putting in like a few little row houses there and filling up the rest of the area with trees and things. I'm trying to not put houses absolutely everywhere, as I feel like some areas there might have been houses bulldozed, or the land might have just been always reserved for the highway. And then here moving on to basically this next street, which is a very similar process to building the previous stuff, which is why you see it sort of skipping through, and just placing down houses. Along here I had to do a lot more to kind of make these houses look alright, as the angles don't exactly allow you to just place down houses in a grid like I was previously and have been doing quite a lot throughout the series. So yeah, here I just had to go in manually and do these houses. For these ones, the buildings only have fence props on two sides, so the back and the right hand side I think don't have fences, and that can just be done by hand and allows things to be added in manually when I'm not placing them exactly right next to each other in a nice conforming grid. But now we're actually moving on to detailing along the side of the highway, and this is the sort of ramp that heads onto the south facing highway, and just placing down a few trees along that cliff there, as well as the safety barriers along that off ramp or on ramp, and then going along with trees here. For this part I'm just doing it all by placing these down manually, but a bit later in the episode I decided to create a forest brush preset that has a lot of those smaller bushes and trees there that I was using, just to make things a lot easier and less repetitive for myself. Yeah, and here just placing down these underpass prop things by Avanya, and just using them as sort of a retaining wall alongside where the ground would have had to been excavated in, and just doing that right along until basically the cliff texture disappears, and then it just kind of ends there, as you see. And then using those same assets but in a different way along this side, and also creating like a crash barrier out of them with them then sloping down. This was kind of unusual. I think there was another attempt that I did something similar to this, but it kind of didn't look really that okay, so I decided to go for this attempt instead. I think it looks fairly okay once the rest of the area around it is filled up, but right now it looks a bit unusual. More crash barriers. I think I ended up cutting a lot of this work out after this. And yeah, then just skipping over to another little subdivision area, and just placing cul-de-sacs again. For this one I'm sort of going with a slightly different approach, using one of the 6 lanes roads, and then also using no controller on it but making it look significantly different, and placing down some ploppable asphalt and then a stain decal on top of it to make it look like it's a bit better blended into the colour of the original road because the ploppable asphalt was a bit dark for my liking. And yeah, just placing down a whole heap of houses and doing this detailing along here again. I probably honestly spend way too much time detailing all these little corners and things, but I think it looks really nice, and if I'm prepared to do it, then I might as well do it. And yeah, just placing down some trees, some random props like that pool, that garden swing, and yeah, just filling out the rest of this area with a whole lot of trees. And you'll see me skipping through a lot of this stuff and moving on to work on this small park. I imagine that there might have been houses here, or this area might have been left blank or something, because it is sort of on the border of where the newer style suburbs interact with the older style suburbs that I've been building up until this episode in the series. But anyway, just putting a few trees around the place, including along the edge of that retaining wall, and using the vanilla playground prop there in that park. But now we're moving on to another one of these overpass, kind of the beginning of the bridge, and just putting in that overpass thing and putting in some ploppable grass and then placing those bushes on top of it, and then coming through with the forest brush and painting down a whole lot of these trees. I found that if you disable some setting in Fine Road Anarchy, it stops them from showing up on the roads, but that can also be annoying sometimes as they don't get close to the roads at all, and then you have to do that by hand rather than just deleting them off the roads if they are overlapping. But here I was using larger trees as this is close to the older part of the highway, so the trees would have grown a bit more, and just adjusting some of them that were overlapping with the road, deleting some and just making some of it a lot denser, and then coming through with my smaller forest brush, or forest brush of smaller trees I should say, and putting these closer to what is one of the newer parts of the highway, and then putting in this little overpass thing and make it smaller with procedural objects, as you see me do in a second, just so it lines up a bit better with the width of these highway roads, as I think those are designed for your regular two-way, two-lane street. But anyway, here the last thing I'm doing for this part of the episode is just going through and putting in a whole lot of these safety barriers, and I have to say this looks quite nice when you see it in the cinematics. So now we're moving on to the second part of detailing around the highway, and here where this off-ramp splits off from the highway to connect to the local streets, I just wanted to put something along the edge of it so that it didn't appear as though this section of road is actually a bridge. And to achieve that I was just using these retaining walls and sinking them slightly below the road so that you can't see the top of them coming through the road, but the thickness of the bridge for the road is thick enough that you don't really notice how it ends there. And then just placing down a few little smaller trees and things along in this area here, just to fill up the area, I guess, as well as this overpass support thing for the bridge that goes over the highway. This is one of the main roads that we're working on in the last episode where we built the roundabout. And here just placing down a few decals along this road. I imagine that originally this road was here, and it's kind of been left there since the highway's been built, but there's now nothing around it, as things had to be removed or whatever for the highway to go through there, and it's just in a little bit of disrepair, and hence the cracked decals and things. And here going along and using these surface networks, the grass one, and then in a second you'll see me go through and use node controller to create a sort of slope on this. Here I'm just like adjusting one side of them and creating a slope, and then now we're actually trying to work on the retaining wall underneath this bridge. This is sort of an attempt that I abandoned, but I wanted to show you what I was doing here. I was just using these prefab walls by Beard Monkey from one of the construction packs, and wanted to have it so the wall came around where all this cliff texture and stuff is. But in a second we move on to my second attempt, which was using slope profiles instead. First I went through with the clipping networks to basically just hide all the normal terrain so that I could actually see what I'm working with without that stuff being in the way. I found that where the cliff texture is on the actual terrain, it was creating this black area, so I had to go through and change the roads at the top of this to be bridges, and then sort of slope the terrain underneath that a bit better so that there weren't like cliffs appearing underneath, and that sort of solved the problem of the weird blackness, and also just making sure it was at the right height so it didn't clip through the road. And then here I'm just going along with some more trees and things in between this area, and just filling it up. I think these are sort of my larger trees, since this is in between the sort of original parts of the highway, so there can be a few larger trees there. But for actually placing down the trees on the slopes, it was a bit difficult because even with tree snapping, the trees wanted to snap to the actual terrain rather than where the slopes are. So I had to shift them manually, which was a little bit tedious, and I wish there was an easier way to do it, but it kind of ended up with the result that I wanted. And here, just placing down a gantry, this is just kind of to show you an example of what I'm doing here. I'm probably actually not going to do many more of these right now in this episode, so it won't feature in the cinematics, because this is sort of a difficult process to texture. It just takes a really long time, and I'm not really in the mood for doing that at the moment, I guess. But I'm just showing you sort of how I'm going about doing this with these procedural object signs that I used in the last episode, and then I'll swap them out with some textured versions later. So now we're moving on to the final part of the episode, and here I'm just filling in this area in between where we built in episode 16 and the interchange from the last episode. And here just placing down this terraforming network to sort of flatten the terrain so that I can place down a vanilla bike path here. You would have seen me start placing down that bike path just before, and that is the first one we're ever building in the city. I do plan to have some sort of bike network throughout the city, but I just haven't really got to building that yet. So this was a nice way to start it, and here I'm just going along and placing some trees in between the bike path and the highway to kind of separate it out. Again, just using slightly smaller trees and just kind of doing some of that by hand, as it's sort of hard to get it on the cliffs there, and also using them to cover up the cliffs. I think that was the main reason I actually put them there, is to cover up all the cliff texture. And here this area is going to be connected by a roundabout, so I'm just using this one lane roundabout road and adjusting it with node controller to make the corners smoother, and I think I even moved it out a little bit just to make the whole radius of it slightly wider. And then building the roads. For these ones I'm just using straight ones, but in between here and the rest of this area there'll be some slightly more curved roads which I'm about to start building, and also the area off to the right I'm going to do off camera right after I finish recording this commentary, and that'll get included in the cinematics. But yeah, here I'm just placing down a road, and this area I guess is kind of a teaser for next episode, since next episode I plan on doing a lot of suburbs work around the city, just trying to expand things a great deal, and I probably won't show everything I do in that episode, and that same can be said for this episode, as I've cut a bit out that you'll see in a couple of minutes. We kind of jump through things quite quickly, like placing down these houses and then doing other things, but after the next episode I plan to do some sort of live play thing where I just go through the city and reflect on the past 20 episodes by that point, and then potentially do a cinematic video, just taking some nice shots around what we've built so far. Then I'll probably take a break from uploading for a while, as I've been working on a new series, but that is still very far from being ready for release. Yeah, and here back on screen I'm now just placing down a few of my houses, along with some sort of row houses along here, just something a little bit more dense for the area. But we've almost reached the end of the episode, so if you've enjoyed this one, make sure to leave a like. It really sends good signals to YouTube so they promote this video to more people. Subscribe to my channel for another video and some more stuff related to City Skylines coming in the future. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.